Why, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Aussie Roll Call podcast. I am one of your hosts, my name is Stevie, and if you've ever been curious about what it takes to become an award-winning TTRPG author, well, do we have the episode for you. In today's show, we will be talking to the Silver ENNIE winning Kat Clay. Now, Kat Clay is an author, she is a writer, and she writes TTRPG adventures specifically for Call of Cthulhu. Her most recent adventure, The Well of All Fear, won a Silver ENNIE Award for Best Community Content. We had an amazing chat with Kat, and I sincerely hope that you enjoy this conversation and get as much out of it as we did.
So we've got our entire team here for this interview, which tells me something about how excited we all are to have a chat with Kat, which I didn't mean to rhyme, but here we are and it did. Kat, can you tell our lovely Aussie Roll Call audience a bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm just this random person on the internet that responded to a Twitter post. That's why I'm on this podcast. I'm also a tabletop role-playing game writer, and I just won a Silver ENNIE at the ENNIE Awards at Gen Con this year. I write Call of Cthulhu games. I absolutely love Call of Cthulhu. This is my second scenario that I've written, so I've actually only written 2 games so far, but I have been playing video games since I was a toddler, but actually only came to tabletop role-playing games a little bit late. So I feel like that's an interesting conversation we can have on this podcast. Apart from that, I write fiction and reviews. I run my own YouTube channel where I talk about games and review games, stream a bit of those Choices Matter narrative RPGs like Baldur's Gate 3 and, Dragon Age. Excited for that. So yeah, that's a bit about me. But yeah, it's been an interesting transition for me from kind of writing novels and fiction to exploring the tabletop space.
Yeah, I think certainly from what so just for clarity, came to the tabletop space late, but from the improv and theatre side. So I fully think we could talk for hours about that side of everything. But it's certainly very evident in The Well of All Fear, which is your ENNIE Award medaling. I was about to say adventure, but it's
an adventure. I think adventure scenario,
which is Regency Cthulhu, as opposed to classic Cthulhu is 1920s, but setting it in a different time period. I certainly think, from what I can tell, having read both that and The Hammersmith Haunting, that you like taking pieces and putting them in different time periods. I don't want to say tropes, but that sort of building of atmosphere through classic archetype, classic stereotype of settings. Would that be a true thing to say?
Yeah, I think you're actually tapping onto something that's pretty important to me with both of those games. So the thing is with Call of Cthulhu, you can set it in any time period. So I think it's a myth you need to bust around. Call of Cthulhu traditionally is set in 1920s, but obviously there's been a whole bunch of modules and guidebooks. There's, Invictus, Dark Ages, there's Gaslight. Obviously there's an updated Gaslight book coming, and the Regency Cthulhu was recently released last year, and there's also modern Cthulhu. So they're the kind of main settings, but technically you can write a Cthulhu in any period. It's very up to you, as long as it's kind of following those 7th edition rules. But for me, the tropes thing is really important. I mean, I bring a big gender lens to my games, and I feel like the gender agenda is real in my games. I think the thing for me is that I'd like to take tropes that are surrounding Call of Cthulhu and kind of the genre, like the periods, Gaslight and Regency, and then try to turn them on their heads. And part of that is taking some of those gender expectations of how especially female characters should behave and NPCs should behave in the periods, and subverting them in some way. So especially with The Well of All Fear, I think most of the NPCs are not as they appear. That's, and without getting into spoilers, every single one of them is kind of subverting an archetype. And that was really intentional for me when I was writing The Well of All Fear. It's not an accident.
The Well of All Fear is 100% up my alley, and particularly the subverting of the gender norms and the subverting of tropes, and having people not appear appear one way but then subverting that was so masterfully done.
Yeah, and I kind of want I want, I mean, look, we're stereotyping here, but like, obviously there's a high proportion of blokes who sit down to play at a Call of Cthulhu table, and I wanted them to be challenged in some way, but in a fun way, like not in a way that I'm hitting anybody over the head with messaging or anything like that. But I wanted them to sit down at the table, potentially take a player character that's unlike someone they might normally play, and then go through this adventure and kind of be like, oh, okay, surprise, surprise, surprise. Because bathhouse tropes are like so much fun, right? Because hijinks ensue, right? Whenever somebody goes to a bathhouse, people are wearing towels, there's like chaos happens, right? People are running around, there's slippery water, there's mysterious steam. There's so much
vulnerability and mystery.
Oh, it's fun. It's fun. And the thing was, for me writing this, a lot of Regency stuff has been set at Bath. But when I was doing the research, I was kind of like, there's actually 2 Bath towns in the Regency period in England. Aquae Sulis, which is Bath, and Aquae Arnamicae, which is Buxton. And I recently got to go to Buxton in the UK and visit it after setting my game there. And it was just absolutely thrilling to be able to see the whole setting in real life. But the other thing I will say is that if you like bathhouses, my next game also has bathhouses. So I realize it's just something I'm into. But I have a game coming out in the upcoming Cthulhu Invictus book next year with Golden Goblin Press. And I'm describing that as Knives Out in the Villa of Hadrian. And of course, Hadrian's Villa had a sick bathhouse. Like, literally, I've read the architectural books on it. It was like marble to the walls, mosaics. There's multiple bathhouses. There were moats full of water. So you're going to have a good time with that.
Yeah, that
Stevie is so excited.
I am
The look on their face.
excited.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm like, I didn't expect to come on this podcast and talk about bathhouses, but here we are.
I have to ask, since you've been there physically now, is there anything you kind of like change or add, like little features that you've seen it in person?
Actually, I felt very chuffed that I'd done a really good job. Like, I'd had that feedback from people who live in the area and said, this really recreates the feeling. But I did do a lot of research. The Wonders of the Peak website, which I've got a list of references in the back of the game, provided a lot of that context around the ancient Roman heritage. But I was kind of going down that, I'm a history nerd, going down that deep dive rabbit hole of, I was even looking at the Derbyshire archaeological records from when they excavated the Buxton Crescent. And that was the line where I was like, Kat, I think you might have gone too far.
No such thing. No such thing. Dig. Do it.
Yeah. The rabbit holes are where the stories come from. Truth is stranger than fiction.
And that's one of the things I really loved about this scenario is that you've kind of got 3 different layers of history at work. You've got the ancient Roman stuff, you've got the Celtic stuff, which predates the Roman stuff, and then you've also got the Regency era, and like weaving all of those 3 together, you've done it so masterfully, and like you sort of get that sense of like layer and occupation that Roman Britain had, and like its continued occupation up to, the current modern day. And I feel like that was done really masterfully.
I'm happy to come on this podcast. I'm just getting praise upon praise. It's just compliment city. I think for me too, there's a historical thing that the Regency folks were very much into Roman mythology. Like their ideal beauty was a kind of based on a Roman kind of classical look. The dresses that they wore, the Empire line was very much like inspired by Roman styles, and same with the hair. So it was kind of held up as this pinnacle of beauty. And I feel like there's a really strong connection then to have that Roman history connecting with the Regency one. I think that connected it well. Like, I wouldn't always put those kinds of levels into it, but I like the fact that history remains in a place. It's not that it just exists superficially as is right now. That there's obviously layers to the place that you're in. So that fascinates me.
So the place that I work, which I am not going to dox myself on the internet with, but I regularly run a tour, and we talk a lot about the layers of the city in which I live, and how it is, how it's changed and how it stays the same. And I think it is very much one of those things that you see coming through in this about like you are talking about a place and a location that has history and depth, which I think is kind of true across. I mean, as you say, maybe not in quite so much depth, but across a lot of the works that I definitely didn't, as I say, spend half of my day perusing on your on your website. But I think it's there's certainly, for those who are worried, who are listening, it is not all bathhouse, this scenario. This is, there are many layers. There's a ball, as every Regency person will want there to be. There are certainly definitely layers to it, and obviously no spoilers for what comes through a lot of that. I'd hate to spoil people's opportunity to play it if they would choose to do so.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even need to go to the bathhouse to solve the crime, but like if you want, it's worth doing. It's fun. Yeah, and I designed originally because it's written in 4-act structure, that the first act is designed to be quite sandboxy. So if your investigators want to run around town causing chaos, ruining their reputations, that is perfectly fine. I've got avenues for them to do that.
That is something I did want to touch on, is like the fact that this is kind of, there is a sandbox element to it, and they don't, like, it's very much not super linear the way that you've structured this particular scenario. Could you talk a little bit about the process of working through that, writing that? Did you do any sort of play testing to sort of work out what kind of avenues players were likely to take? Could you walk us through that process of writing something that wasn't super linear?
So yeah, my first game, the Hammersmith Haunting, for logical reasons, it is a linear scenario. It's fairly linear, and that's because it's a one shot and it's designed to be played. A lot of people play it at conventions, which is, it's great to hear for me, but obviously you need to kind of streamline that a bit. Whereas with this one, I wanted to challenge myself, and I wanted to make it more open and say, here's a location. Here are some clues in each of the locations. I think for me, this one, the plot and the story fell into place really quickly. And I don't say that to big note myself as some, incredible plotter or anything like that. But it just, I had one of those kind of weird moments of like epiphany where all the mathematical symbols just like came into being, and I had all my Post-it notes on the wall, and I'm like, oh, that's how it's going to play out. I think 4-act structure is helpful in that way, that it's essentially you are funneling. So I was like, when you're at the start, and because I've written quite a bit of crime stories, you know where you want to end up, and you know kind of like the solution to the crime. I think that's actually a very good place to start if you're writing a mystery. And then you kind of funnel up from there rather than go top down. And that means that you can kind of breadcrumb out those clues throughout the scenario. And the thing for me is that you need to make sure that in Cthulhu, like, your clues aren't gated behind dice rolls, but they need to be earned. And so I wanted to make sure that every clue that you get, you have to do some work for, but it's not that you can't get that clue if you don't try to get it. It's just that the consequences of your roles are going to have different, if you fail or succeed, different outcomes will happen to you. And so it was kind of making sure that all the clues could be obtained in different locations, at least 2 locations. But also, if people got to a point where they'd missed a clue, there is a very helpful NPC for keepers.
I was going to raise that, yes.
Yeah.
It's like, helpful NPC wanders onto scene. Here is a clue that you may have missed.
Which I think ensures that the players still get to an ending and they don't feel blocked, but that probably isn't as rewarding as unlocking those clues earlier.
And look, it's not a Deus Ex Machina. It's not, the chorus descends and it's just suddenly like, I have clues for thee. It's actually she takes the place of an actual person who lived in that period and worked at the well, and so legitimately would have been in the area and would have had local knowledge. If for anyone who's often played Call of Cthulhu, the concierge at the local hotel, who's the font of information, but she legitimately has a reason for being there. It's not so much of a construct.
Yeah, and the players do get to meet her earlier if they wish as well.
Yeah.
So
I was just going to say, I do find with a lot of Call of Cthulhu one-shots, it's so easy to miss the one life-saving clue and just immediately have rocks fall on you and die inevitably. So it's nice to have this kind of backup there in case you do run astray.
Although I did playtesting was helpful for that because for the most part, this one they got pretty well, and I was really pleased with how it flowed from the most part. There were the one clue that was kind of like the players were just like, should we do this at the end? And I'm just sitting there as the keep going, just do it, okay, just do it. Like, come on, guys, like maybe that's a really good idea. And they're like just sitting there for ages going, yeah, what do you reckon? Like, do you think this is a thing? And then so I realized that like I probably needed to put a little bit more explicit information into the handouts. And I think subtext is, you know, it's often what you think is subtext is too subtle.
yeah, that was something that I did notice in the handouts was, you know, there is definitely, I could tell that you'd playtested it, is what I'm saying, because, you know, there were things like watermarks and stuff that you can see in certain situations and things. And I'm like, okay, this is a clue that probably needed to be a little bit more heavy-handed because of playtesting.
No, not at all, actually. The only handout that really changed a lot since playtesting, there's a flyer in the exhibition. The rest of them were there. That was how they were. But that's partly because I'm obsessed with watermark paper.
I love when you can see someone in their games, though. Like things like that, we're like, yes, that's a you coming through in this. I have played precisely one game of Cthulhu. But that's me. That's a now yet. It's a yet. But playing lots of playtesting lots of different things, and I love when you can feel someone's true passions like history and the little details that people put into games, which it sounds like you like to work in, maybe unintentionally, maybe very intentionally, into your own games.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the things people talk about when you start out writing games is that, like, they say, oh yeah, once you start publishing games, people will follow you because they like your style. And I kind of, when you're writing something, you're like, do I have a style? I don't know. But I mean, we all like different things. We all enjoy different things. And that evidently flows into your work and your writing. And that, you know, having looked at a couple of friends who started writing around the same time, you know, some of us have similar interests, but we all have very different styles. And, you know, everybody is working in their own little niche version of Call of Cthulhu, which I think is really interesting. It's not one consistent conglomerate of this is how a Call of Cthulhu scenario should look. So that's really interesting to me.
So, in terms of getting into writing scenarios for, say, Call of Cthulhu or any other system, really, what would be your advice?
My advice is really simple advice, which is to give it a go. Like, I think there's a lot of self-doubt when we start out writing a project, even if you've been published. For me, I've had short stories published, I've had articles published, you know, it wasn't a first time publishing something, but for me, there was a real nervousness about putting a game out into the world and seeing how it would be received, because I felt like I was, you know, I am not as experienced as someone who's been playing D&D since they were 13. And for me, I was, you know, had these moments of like, oh, am I going to get it wrong? But the opposite has happened, right? It's kind of like you can get so caught up in being scared about putting something out there that you don't do it. But speaking from experience after publishing the 2 games, like, it's just opened up so many opportunities for me. I've met an incredible community of people that I didn't know existed. I mean, I've even traveled to the UK to meet people I've met through the tabletop writing community. I've got to speak on panels internationally and at PAX, and none of that would have happened if I hadn't put the first game out. And that's the hardest thing, I think, is putting that out and being brave enough to put your work in a public forum. And that takes a lot of courage. And I think I would certainly encourage people who are thinking about doing it to just step over that line and be brave. The other thing I think about too is that I took the Storytelling Collective, Write Your First Adventure course, and I mean, I loved it. I think it's a fantastic course. I can't recommend it enough because it gets you to do it in the space of a month or six weeks, essentially. Like your aim is to write it in a month, but it usually takes a little bit to just format it for the bundle that comes out. But what is great about that is it sets a time limit on your work. You have to get it out. You're done. And obviously,
because no project is truly finished. There's always something you can tweak.
Yeah,
100%. And I think there's a perfectionistic streak that a lot of us have, where we're like, "Oh, it's not done. It's not ready to be published. It's not finished yet."
I could research another bathhouse.
Yeah, I got to research another bathhouse. I need more ionic columns. Whereas that helps you get over that, getting that basic minimum product out. And let me tell you, there were errors in my game when I published it. I had a section that went into first person, and then I reread it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I did not proofread this before I pressed the big publish button. But the great thing about publishing as a PDF, you just update it and nobody knows.
There's no amount of proofreading until that catches everything until you hit send or you hit publish, and then suddenly the error, big and bold.
Yep. When I took the Well of All Fear to print, I sat down and did a really deep proofread of it, and then I was like, there are so many errors and just little typos and things I needed to fix, and the handouts were mislabeled, and I'm like, I'm really glad I'm checking this.
With the Storytelling Collective, they offer, from memory, 4 different courses. There's one that's like generic, and I believe there is one specific for COC. Which one did you choose when you?
Call of Cthulhu.
Yep.
Yeah, it's my one true love. And also, it was the only system I knew at the time. I had never played Dungeons and Dragons. I played a hell of a lot of Baldur's Gate 1, but like I had never played Dungeons and Dragons. The only system I knew how to even play was Call of Cthulhu, and I'd maybe ran 3 sessions. I was I was very inexperienced.
Maybe in terms of playing the game, but in terms of writing stories and all of the other skills and the research and all of the other skills that you have, because obviously writing scenarios is a very multidisciplinary thing. You have to have a wide variety of skills and bring those together. So what advice would you have for people who maybe think that they don't have the right amount of experience? You ran 3 games of Call of Cthulhu before you wrote your first.
Yeah, I reckon I'd run the starter set and maybe a couple of other things, but I'd been playing a lot of it. For me, maybe enthusiasm and naivety got me over the line a little bit, because I wasn't so entrenched in the community of how do the machine gun rules work in Call of Cthulhu? Nobody knows how they work. Let me tell you, even people who've been running the game for 10 years can't tell you off the top of their head. I think for me too, it's just to spend the time looking at the professional product. So for me, I studied, I don't want to go back to university, but I spend time studying the work that I want to emulate. And so I was reading the Call of Cthulhu rulebook. I was reading the scenarios that Chaosium put out. And then, I was reading Mike Mason's work and saying, this is the style I'd like to emulate. One of my favorite scenarios is Dances of Vice, Horror and Ecstasy in the Berlin source book. And so I was reading it and studying the style in which it's written. And that was the hardest hurdle for me to get over, because it was getting my head around the fact that a tabletop role-playing scenario is somewhere between a fictional story and a technical document, and wanting to make it enjoyable for keepers to read if they were reading the story, but also facilitating them to be able to run a game. And that for me is the key goal for me when I'm writing something, is to meet those two things together.
Because being able to follow a style guide is really important for anyone who wants to get anything published. You absolutely need to follow whatever style guide you are required, and that often starts with just looking at what's published before you even go into the back-end documentation.
It is, and I was going to say, like, Chaosium have their style guides available for free. So I didn't know this when I started, but they're there on the internet, and if you want to look them up, you're absolutely, you can.
So do Wizards of the Coast. Like, they're very accessible. The other thing I want to point out is how you sort of talked about that it is a blend of a fiction document and a technical document. And something that really stood out to me, particularly as I was reading The Well of Orphea, was like things like the cross-referencing that you do. Like, you say, they'll pick up this clue. Oh, by the way, keepers, the other clues are here and here and here. Here's how they all sort of interlink. Making sure that the keepers feel that one step ahead of the players. Like, assuming, like, most game masters will read the entire document before they sit down to play, but having those various touch points and having it's on page such and such, and this is in chapter, those sort of, like, that technical cross-referencing was masterfully done and didn't really feel like it broke the flow of the document and the story for me, particularly coming at it as someone who does run a lot of games.
Stevie, I feel like I just need you in my pep corner.
You'll have this episode to just be like, I'm feeling bad about myself. Oh, they said such nice things about me.
We'll provide you for loop once we've done editing.
But seriously, I think too, I'm thinking as someone who wants to run the game, right? And things that I put in things that I find helpful, which is, okay, so the second half of the clue, in case I need to read that or find it, is here. Or the little things like just dot pointing what people should know at the end of a chapter and what the players should know going into the next chapter. Just so the keeper can make sure that they're like, oh, okay, we've met those requirements. It's time to level up,
Because I don't run games, I feel like I certainly can imagine playing in both of these games and having a lot of fun, because I think they also, like, the prefabbed characters and things like that are constructed in such a way they're like, oh, yeah, these people make sense in the kind of world that's being built, which I have definitely played in one-shots, short campaigns where I'm like, your prefabbed character means absolutely nothing to this. Why have you just genericked me a character? So I think even from a player perspective, it's a really useful thing to be like, oh, I don't have to know huge amounts about Cthulhu to pick this up or to join in a game of this. There are prefabricated characters that do make sense in this world, which I think is another testament, especially for keepers who want to run this, and you've got new players who might be interested in this kind of setting. You've got that to play with. You're not sort of striking people out being like, right, character creation, which I think can be such a scary thing for new players to a system, but also new keepers to a system who, even with players who've been around for a minute. It's
actually something I am really passionate about. I love making characters. It's like my favorite part. So this is how dedicated I am to play characters. Some people just they just auto count their characters, play characters for this. No, I literally sit there and roll each and every single one of them using the hardcore rolling method in the rule book. And then I'm like, what could this person be? And then I have some frameworks as well, because I think it's important to include diversity in your player characters. So I usually try to include 2 blokes, 2 women, and at least 1 non-binary or gender diverse character. And then from there, I try to also create racial diversity over those characters as well. And that's just super important to me, so that if you come to my table, you can feel represented, or you can feel like you can take someone on that maybe is different to your experience, but you're going to have a really fun time. And also, I have this thing about I'll have, I think Call of Cthulhu has kind of 4 main archetypes you have in character types. So you have your tank, you have your dilettante, you have your technical mechanical person, and you have your library use person, usually the researcher, the historian, the archaeologist. But that leaves you with a 5th character, and that's who I like to call my wildcard character, who is the Chaos Gremlin character, who you kind of like, I put them in there because they're not necessarily going to be the most useful in the scenario, but they're going to be a heck of a lot of fun. Darian Sterling in The Hammersmith Haunting is absolute the wild card character. He has a blunderbuss. He has skills in wine tasting and fashion design and, loves his pets. And, how useful is that, fighting a gothic mythos creature? But
you're going to have fun playing him. You might not survive, but
might be the character I was the most interested in.
I was watching Kate's face as you were describing the Chaos Gremlin as a lot of fun, but not particularly useful in any of its
It started lighting up my stage.
Dan can attest to the fact that I will bring a human-sized ladybug to a gunfight. So, I am here for the Chaos Gremlin character.
Everyone needs one at the table. It makes life more interesting.
No,
yeah.
I salute it. I absolutely salute it. And they always tend to be the most fun player who picks them up and runs them, and they'll use the blunderbuss in a way that isn't shooting at a bad guy. And
it takes.
And your knowledge of wine could be important. Your knowledge of wine is important. There's sediments that are floating in a something, there's reasons.
Mystic substance, yes.
Yeah.
Or just it's how you cope with the mythos, really.
I care about fashion design, so I'm going to remember that person because I will remember what they were wearing. I don't know,
Well, it's actually funny because they did the Miskatonic Playhouse did an AP of The Hammersmith Haunting, and the guy used both of those skills in really creative ways. I thought it was great.
So, what future? You've teased a scenario coming out in a book. Did you want to revisit that?
So it's called An Ominous Herald. It's the Knives Out at the Villa of Hadrian. I don't have a heap more information of that, but it's been submitted to the publisher and, watch this space. I'll be posting about it on the social medias when it comes. But I am working on some new scenarios. I'm writing one for Miskatonic Repository Con, which is a free online convention. You can play scenarios written by community content creators like me. I am a special guest, which is nice. And I am playtesting a game that I've dubbed The Resort, which is basically a lot of not very nice rich people go to a tropical island private spa and maybe not many of them come back. So
Glass Onion.
I feel like there's a whole genre of these kinds of fun things. But the technical challenge for me with this scenario is I wanted to write a really flexible convention scenario so that it can be run in 2, 3, or 4 hours. It's kind of block-based, it's location-based, and it can be time-based. So, pulling the triggers on the key events that happen it's going to be more up to the keeper and how the scenario is running versus, you have to find every single clue before you move to the next. You're not going to find all the clues. That's fine. Chaos will happen. And the other thing with that is that I have this thing, when you go to a convention and you hand out all the sheets, the character sheets, and everybody reads everyone else's character sheets. And you're kind of like, everybody knows what Joe Bloggs' secret motivation is. So what I'm going to have is an additional character attribute that people pull out of a hat after they've chosen their character sheet, and it'll just turn everything on its head.
Amazing. Adding extra chaos to...
This is basically designed as the maximum chaos scenario.
If I ever play this game, my secret skill will be wine tasting, and I will find it.
Yeah, Oniology, please.
Well, I still need to figure out the secret skills, so maybe I will make it like a wine tasting skill. Who knows? It'll be a surprise.
So for those who are regular listeners to the podcast, you know that we have 5 questions that we ask every single guest. They are designed to be answered very, very quickly with absolutely no explanation, because why would you need one? And so Kat has had these in advance, so we can go through these. So Kat, very, very important, most critical important tabletop role-playing game question, best gaming table snack.
I'm a pastries person, so we have a lot of donuts, croissants, flaky things. I listened to your other podcast about sticky fingers at the table. I'm like, sticky fingers all the way at the table. Dice roll better when they stick to the table.
Dice roll better when they stick to the table. Feels like the slogan for this.
You stick the bottom bit with the 1 and then they roll 20s.
You're loading your dice. Good to know. Speaking of dice, favorite dice. And we have said before, this could be size of dice, this can be set of dice, this could be both. Favorite dice?
Okay, so I have 2. I have Total Dice Envy. I'm playing Curse of Strahd at the moment, and my friend who's running it bought special Strahd dice. Like, I think from a local producer. They're sharp-edged, spattered with kind of blood-streaked glitter with all these black Gothic numbers on them. And I want them, and I don't have them. And that I've got... Maybe when we defeat Strahd, I'll take them from him. But the other dice is very special to me, and they're coming to me, is that I get special 2024 ENNIE's winner dice.
Fancy.
Yeah, so they look amazing.
Totally fair. You can't not call for those. That's fair. Favorite TTRPG to introduce new players to? So thoughts? I mean, I have a sneaky suspicion we know, but...
Yeah, look, I still only know like 3 systems. So I think it's going to be Call of Cthulhu, although I'm playing a lot of Pendragon at the moment and I'm kind of loving it. So, yeah, but I think I would introduce people to Cthulhu because, you know, it's so much fun.
So we've got dice, we've got our snacks. What is your tabletop must-have? What do you have to have at the table?
I was thinking about this and now it's slipped my mind. What do I need at the table? Obviously, I have a notebook for every campaign I'm in and my fountain pen, and I kind of theme the notebook to the campaign, except that I take notes and they're kind of like, my friend is a really good note taker for games, and I write these kind of insane dot points and then have to turn back to like the year before. And I'm like, oh, what did actually happen then? There's like, you know, right arm, Sadafka, some creepy guy, there's a tentacle. So, yeah, the notebook is essential, but I'm not sure how valuable.
Essential, but not valuable.
It's a comfort notebook is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. It makes me look like a good player when really I'm like such a, like, you know, wing and a prayer player.
I have a player who exclusively writes his notes in character, so they're almost always useless, but hilarious when he's adding to the recaps of things.
Well, most of the notes I've taken from our Strahd campaign have been like funny things people have said at the table, so I remember them. It's not actually like what happened, it's just quotes of people saying stupid things.
Maybe it's more accurate to call them a memoir then.
Yeah, memoir.
If you could have a companion, minion, animal, robot, like a familiar in Dungeons and Dragons, what would it be? What's your little guy?
Well, apart from my cat, who loves to sit at the table, actually that was the best accessory at the table, is my cat. But my D&D character, the Scrying Hawk, has Ephemere the Hawk, who follows her everywhere, and you scouts like in this kind of Assassin's Creed style hawkiness. So definitely Hawk.
Fair. And like we don't judge anyone on their choices. So yep, that's the choice. Like but like we don't. That's what's great. No.
I got to be honest. I'm still mulling over the pastry thing.
Yeah, I can't. I don't know if I can go past pastry to the table, but that's like, you know, to each their own. And Dan, it's not our table.
Have I just like broken a cardinal sin of tabletop? See, I didn't learn
but
the
I'm just
rules
worried about
growing up, guys.
What does your notebook look after? Like your notebook memoir look after with all the pastry smears?
Oh no. Well, Kat, we've said that people will need to look on your social media to find out about upcoming things and to get in touch with you and to talk more Cthulhu things than everyone could ever ask for. So where can people find you in your little parts of the internet?
You can find me at catclay.com, Katclay. And I am Catclay on all of the social medias, and probably most active on YouTube. And you can find me on the other ones. If you want to get in touch, feel free to contact me through my website. But you can also find my games on Drive-Thru RPG. The Hammersmith Haunting is a Gaslight one-shot for Call of Cthulhu, and it is a bestseller on Drive-Thru RPG. And then the Well of All Fear, the Silver ENNIE winning, nominated for Best Adventure Short Form scenario, is also available there. And yeah, you can get it in print or PDF. So take your poison.
I'm sure lots of people will be like, yes, Regency Cthulhu, yes, absolutely. Or we can find it there, perfect. Thank you for giving up some of your time to come and talk to us. I hope we shall talk, I'm sure, much more after this about pastries at the table and, well, if Stevie's got anything to do with it, bathhouses. So thank you so much. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you're listening to this when it drops, PAX is this week. So if you want all of the news and goss about what's going on at PAX Australia 2024, head back to episode 4 for all of that news. In crowdfunding news, Ghostfire Gaming, which was established in Melbourne in 2019, has a new Kickstarter out called Grim Hollow Transformed. This Kickstarter is for a 5e compatible supplement. It contains a campaign guide, a player's guide. There are over 100 new magic items. There are dark fantasy rules. There are 40 subclasses. There's a monster hunter class. And there's a bunch of heritages and traits as well. So we'll link to that in the show notes if you are interested in getting your hands on this campaign. It will be running through until the beginning of November 2024. And it has already funded. It's already well over its funding goal. So yeah, head over to Kickstarter and check that out.
If you've got news or you think you're well placed to have an interview with our team, we do also have Google Forms available in our description to get in touch with us. We want to hear about your Kickstarters, about your events, about what it is that you're bringing to the TTRPG space. We know the Australian TTRPG space is vibrant and we want to hear from everybody.
Vox Pops.
Hi, my name is Bonnie and I agreed to be recorded for the ARC podcast.
And Bonnie, what's your best gaming table snack?
Anything that's not too messy.
Nothing too messy, excellent.
Popcorn.
Easy. And what's your favourite dice, either set or a type?
A type, anything glittery. I have a full box collection of so many glittery dice.
Awesome. And what's your favourite game to introduce to new players?
There's a game called Final Girl, not the one you've probably seen on the shelves. It's an Italian game. It's kind of like a cheesy horror game, but not scary. And it's got amazing mechanics.
Awesome. And what's your favourite tabletop accessory must-have?
Really good pen.
Really good pen? Yep. And if you could have a companion or an animal or a robot, what would it be? Slime.
I want a pet slime.
Little pet slime floating
Yeah.
around? Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Some people have been asking us what the best thing they can do is to support the podcast. And honestly, it's rating and reviewing it wherever you're listening to it. It really does help us reach brand new audiences and other listeners just like you. TTRPGs are for everybody, and we want to reach as many people as possible. No matter where you're from, we want you to be part of the discussion, part of the roll call here at Aussie Roll Call.
This podcast is produced in affiliation with the Australian roleplay community. If you'd like to join the ARC community, head to arcrpg.org, where you'll find a link to our vibrant and inclusive Discord server. Your hosts have been Kate O'Sullivan, Dan Machuca, and Stevie Schaefer. Cover art by Helen Graham of Joymon Studios. Title music is Sweet Sunday Groove by Slailkey. Interstitial music is Newer Wave by Kevin MacLeod, used under a Creative Commons 4.0 license. Production by Stevie Schaefer.